So I had a few of you recently ask me to do an episode about what it would be like on your first day as a developer. Now, I've done this before where I talked about my first day at a startup versus a mid-sized company versus a Fortune 500 company. I've worked at around 7 jobs since I started learning to code about 10 years ago. That's not including some of the contracts I've done or working at different boot camps or even owning my own business. But I've also mentored around 100 developers since then, and I've spoken to hundreds more about their first day on the job. So I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what you can reasonably expect to have happen on your first day as a software developer. So let's get into it to know what you can expect, what's most likely to happen, and ways that you can excel and exceed expectations when you first get hired as a software developer. So if you're learning to code, you're probably thinking, is anybody ever going to hire me? Can this really happen? Like, I'm dealing with computer science majors or people that have come from Google or Amazon or all these big tech companies. And you're thinking, could this really be me one day? Would somebody really give me a chance? A person at Parsity recently got hired and he was shocked. He's like, I can't believe they actually hired me. I felt this exact same way when I got my first job. I'm like, do they make a big mistake? Like, am I going to get fired? Am I going to walk in on the first day and they're going to like laugh me out of the room or something like that? And if I'm being honest, even after 10 years and 7 companies, I still kind of feel like that, right? You go through the interview, and what's going to probably shock you about the interview experience, especially if you haven't done it before, is that it's not as technical as you might think. So at Parsity, one of the things I did recently was to introduce mock interviews where we do technical interviews because people suck at them. Let's be honest. People suck at doing technical interviews, me included. That's why there's a whole industry on it. If people were really good at doing technical interviews and understanding data structures and algorithms, there wouldn't be a multi-million dollar, probably a $1 billion industry that is geared towards specifically teaching software developers how to pass interviews. That's a whole other topic in itself that I'm not going to dive into too deep today. But what you're going to probably experience when you're out there on the job hunt is more of a get to know you interview. And this is shocking for a number of reasons because there's a ton of candidates out there. You've heard all about data structures and algorithms because that's all that's on social media. But then when you get to this no name company, which is the 99% of companies that are out there, you haven't heard of them because, of course, you haven't heard of them because we only know what's in the top, few companies in the stock market or something at any given time. So your interview's likely going to be at a company you've never heard of with a small team of somewhere between 3 to 10 to maybe 20 or even 50 software developers. What they're generally going to ask you is something kind of like a vibe check. Basically, like, tell me about a project you worked on. How would you improve it? Here's some code we're going to write together. Let's build a small React component. Here's a take home assignment. Why don't we talk about the take home assignment? What interests you about working here? Maybe some more fluffy questions. I've seen at least 50% of the people at Parsity and around the same amount of people that I've spoken to don't even really have a technical interview. Like, they didn't write any code as part of their interview process. I got a job as a senior software engineer at 2 different companies without writing a single line of code. Do I think that's a good way to determine a candidate's ability? Absolutely not. I would never do that at my own company. And that was one of the first things I changed when I got in because I don't think the vibe check is really a smart way or a non-biased way of finding candidates. But you may encounter this kind of interview. Then you'll get an offer. If you didn't negotiate, one, you lost money. Two, don't do that again or else I'm going to come after you and throw a bag of donuts at you. What the hell? You're leaving 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 on the table. You got to negotiate. And the easiest way to do that, by the way, is simply saying this. I'm so happy to take this offer, but I was hoping to come in more at this range because I want to really stick with this company for the long haul. I know that I'm going to bring a lot of value to the team because I have a background in X, Y, Z. I also see that the market rate in our particular area is around so and so. So I was hoping to get more to this range. What do you think? Leave it open ended. They could either say, I think no. And you say, okay, I'm still willing to take it. That's awesome. Or you could say, I think we'll come in somewhere near the middle and you just got yourself 10, 20, $30,000 more by literally just asking. There's a way to do this. And that's by typically I'll go around 10 to 20% more than the initial offer. If it's a really high offer, I'll probably go 10% more. If it's an offer I really don't like, then one, I'm just going to ask for what I do want at the bare minimum. And if they don't like it, then I'm not going to take it anyway. And around 20% more is about as high as I'd go. If the job offer is 100K and you're like, well, I only take 200K, they're going to laugh you out of the room. The job offer is 100K and you say, I want 130K, that they could say, you know what? Let's see what we can do. So use your head, use your common sense, and don't just get stuck and just take the first thing that comes across your desk or think they're going to laugh you out of the room. If you ask for something reasonable, right? Do it. Trust me. I didn't do this for years, lost tons of money. I've also done it and gained tons of money. So now that you got the job, you got the offer, you negotiated, they give you your starting date. Between now and the starting date, here's what you should be doing. You should say, what should I be working on, learning, or reading about that you think is going to help me on my first day? What is the tech stack that you used? Maybe you know React, but they use Vue or Angular. Maybe you know JavaScript, but they're going to use Python or C# or Ruby or something like that. You could ask them, what do you suggest I do before I come in? Is there a small project or some reading material I can have that would help me get acclimated for my first day? They're either going to say, yeah, here you go. Or more likely, they're going to say, no, not really, just show up. So that first day, you get there. And what typically happens is it's a pretty fluffy day. What goes on is you get your computer in the mail, you get a MacBook or a Windows, whatever. The first day could be just setting up your equipment. That could be it. You're going to need to get access to Git, GitHub, Confluence, whatever documentation center they use, and usually Jira. Jira is a service that basically all software teams use to know what projects they're working on, compose the projects into small tasks, and then split those tasks and assign them to different teammates on the team. And you'll move those tasks between statuses. So it'll be to do or doing or done or delivered or whatever. That is how you track almost all software projects. Jira is the #1 tool that any sophisticated, mature software team uses. There's other tools out there, but none even come close to Jira. So that is probably what you're going to be introduced to on your first day. Now, most software teams start the morning off by doing a stand-up where you will sit down. You actually don't stand up, which is kind of funny. You'll be sitting down or you'll be online or whatever. Your teammates will introduce you, or the person that's talking to you that day will introduce you, and they'll say, here's Charlie or here's Sarah. It's their first day here. Tell me 2 funny facts about yourself. And you're like, oh, geez, I wasn't prepared for this. And you're embarrassed. And then they'll move on to whatever they're going to move on to because no one really cares. Anyway, they're busy doing their own work. And what a daily stand-up will consist of is going around to every developer who sits there and saying, what did you work on yesterday? What are you going to work on today? And is there anything blocking you? Now, you being super new there, you won't have anything to say. What most people do during stand-up is just say something really mundane and boring that is of no use to anybody else. So don't be like that. Try to always go above and beyond, or at least be a little bit entertaining or funny, right? Because that'll make people's days a little better, make you more memorable. So here's a really bland, lame status. Yesterday, I was working on ticket 1321 and ticket 420. And today I will continue working on ticket 1320 and 420. No blockers. They'll move to the next person and they'll just continue this. Completely useless. Which much better is if you say, yesterday I was working on ticket 420, which is making this button a shade of green based on the design team spec. One issue I'm running into is that this shade of green is actually not accessible to people in Argentina who tend to have this color blindness. And so what I'm doing now is working with the team to figure out a workaround for this solution. No blockers, but I am working with the design team to understand the better shade of green we can use. So you want to add a little context to what you're doing. If you have a blocker, something that's preventing you from moving forward with your ticket, just say that. You know, it's really lame when people just say, I have nothing going wrong and I'm just doing the same work. It gives you no indication of what's really happening. So don't do that. That's the best way to stand out and to let other people on your team know what you're really working on, and also make you just look like you're more proactive and engaged, even if you're maybe not. So after stand up, your teammate will probably give you some sort of assignment, some sort of thing you can do, or maybe not. I think a lot of people expect hand holding on their first job, or that people are going to be willing and ready to mentor them. And it's just not the case. People are busy doing their own thing. They're probably under their own stress. They have their own family members. They might not like to mentor people. They may just be letting you shadow them because they were told that they had to let you shadow them, or that you were going to be their onboarding buddy. So you may just be kind of left off to do whatever you want to do for the day. And you may just say, well, damn, what do I do now? I'm getting paid all this money. Should I do something? So be proactive. This is the theme of this episode. On your first day, first week, first month, first year, be proactive. Reach out and say, hey, I'd really like to start working on a ticket. Is there something really small I could take that would show me the deployment process, basically how to get code from my machine out to the web? And you should ask somebody, if they haven't showed you that, how does that happen? Because ultimately what you're going to do on that team is you're going to write code, you're going to get it into GitHub, you're going to have somebody on the team review that code, and then eventually it will be pushed out to the public to see, to your 5, 10, 20, 100 million customers. And so you want to understand part of that process as much as you can. So ask people, hey, are you going to deploy something? If so, can I shadow you? Now, next, figuring out the code base. Code bases are way larger, even on a small team, than anything you've been exposed to if you went to a boot camp or you went to a college or whatever, if you learn how to code on your own. You're going to be exposed to the largest code base you've ever worked on. Now, how do you understand how to work within this code base, especially given no instruction and maybe the people aren't like really being proactive enough with you either? Maybe they're not like reaching out saying, hey, would you like to come see this thing I'm working on? Again, you need to do that. So step one on that first day is just get the code base running. Like literally just get it to open up in a browser or however it's supposed to be run and look at it. If it's a mobile app, run it somehow on a mobile device. If it's a web app, run it on your machine. If it's a back-end service, learn how to get it up and running so you can actually request and hit that service from Postman or something like that. That is your crucial, critical number one step. That's the only thing you should really be doing on day one. And you might think, oh, isn't that easy? Like all you got to do is just run a command. Maybe at your boot camp or your college class or the tutorial you were watching, this is really simple, right? But when you're working with a production code base that's been worked on for years or maybe even a decade or more, it takes a lot to run it. You probably need to have different environment keys that are set. You might need to have your computer set up to hit some other service that it needs to get running. There's usually a database that's involved. There's usually a production version versus a staging version versus this version. You have to get all this stuff up and running. And then you might think, well, how do I even like do anything with it? That's the next thing you do. You keep playing around until you can get this thing in a state where it actually works the same way that a customer might see it. This should lead you to all sorts of little interesting problems. And then that's when you reach out to your teammates and saying, hey, I actually am blocked. Yesterday, I was trying to get the app running. Here's exactly what I did. And here's what's wrong. Keep this short and sweet. And always ask people if they have 5-10 minutes that they could spare to walk you through it. If you just say, I need somebody to help me, that's like a big red flag. People are like, I don't want to just help you, right? Again, they have their own deadlines they're committed to. They're under the gun or under pressure to try to get something delivered. They might not want to just sit with you for half an hour or an hour, right? This isn't like on the internet where you used to ask people on LinkedIn or, maybe at your boot camp, hey, would you like to help me? And they're more than happy to. Most people are like, I got to get my own thing done, man. I'm a junior developer myself. They just hired me 3 months ago. I don't know what's going on, right? But they're afraid to admit it. So you say, I need 5 to 10 minutes with somebody that can help me with this very specific problem. The more specific you can get and the more time bound you can make it, the much higher likelihood that somebody will jump in. And they'll be more than happy to because you didn't just leave it open-ended and they don't have to waste like an hour doing it or something like that. Or if you could even ask somebody, if somebody knows where the documentation is, please point me in the direction of that documentation. Now, here's where you really stand out. During this first day or days on the job, you're barely learning how to get things running. You might have got your first assignment and nobody really expects much from you, if I'm being honest. They just think, here's an assignment to keep you busy and to let you bumble around for a while. It's due in some arbitrary amount of days. You should absolutely be letting them know if you think this is possible or not. This takes a lot of guts because if they give you something that it seems simple, like we just want you to change the color of this button, and on the surface seems simple. Your first ticket or your first assignment will usually be, here's a Jira task that's assigned to you. It's ticket number 42069 or whatever, right? Now you need to do this thing. It'll say, we need the color of this button green, or we need to change the text from this to this. And you think, oh, that's super simple, right? Problem is getting that into the code base, going through the peer review process and learning how to get it across the finish line and into production will take 10 times longer than you probably think. It's not as simple as just changing the text and pushing a button and now it's out in production. You need to go through many steps, maybe talk to many people, maybe just figure out where the hell is this thing? I thought this button was like one simple place and it may end up, it's really difficult. So you want to be really open and talk about, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Remember, your team's threshold for how much you annoy them is really high right now. So, right, they don't have a short fuse. They have a long fuse. So this is the time to quote unquote bother people, annoy people, be a little bit like, hey, I really do need some help, push people a little bit. They're going to be pretty respectful at this point. It's better to know this now than to try to figure this out in 3 months when their expectations are much, much higher. And they won't be so nice about you asking how to change the color of a button when you're 6 months in to your first day on the job. And very lastly, remember, once you're doing all this, expectations are generally pretty low. But one thing you need to do is make expectations clear. You probably think they're going to give you a 30-day plan or a 60-day plan or a 90-day plan and do all this stuff with you. That usually doesn't happen. What usually happens is you just kind of get a ticket and then you get the next ticket and then you get the next ticket. And next thing you know, you're 6 months into the job. You kind of feel like you kind of know what's going on and you've just been cranking out tickets. Do you know if you're doing well or not doing well? You might not know until you get a review a year later from your manager. So, to avoid this situation where you don't really know how you're doing, just simply ask. If they didn't give you a 30-day plan, make a 30-day plan. Say, by the end of the 30 days, here's what I expect myself to have accomplished. And you can write, I expect to have taken on 3 different tickets, varying in difficulty and increasing in difficulty as I do them. So I hope by the end of my first 30 days, I'm able to do this kind of task. Or maybe the end of my 30 days, I just want to know how the whole system works at a really high level. And I want to have put my first ticket into production. That's a really, really good one. You can run it by your manager and say, here's what I'm thinking is a good 30-day plan for me. And you can make it as ambitious or unambitious as you want. And you can kind of get their feedback on it. And that way, you know that they are like, oh, yeah, this is great. This is great. This is perfect. And you can know whether or not you're going to be hitting expectations and if you're on a good track. And then at the end of that 30 days, maybe you get them another 30-day plan. Say, well, hey, 30 days went pretty well. Here's the things I checked off. For the next 30 days or 60 days, here are my new goals. What do you think about this? And they could think, well, I'd actually hope you would do even more in this time. That way, you're both in sync and the expectations are clear. That is the way you win the game and you don't go in there and kind of bumble around, do tickets, find out you're not doing so hot and you get fired 6 months after you get your first job, which I have seen happen, much less likely than you'd ever expect. But why be in the shadows? Why be in the dark? Why not just make your intentions known? Let them know, here's what I think I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to kill it here. You tell me. That is how you're going to crush it at the first day on your new job as a software developer, which is, by the way, where most of your learning will occur. Hope that's helpful. And if you are interested in becoming a software engineer, then obviously join Parsity.io. There's a new program that I'm offering, Parsity.io/inner circle, inner dash circle. It's with me and a buddy of mine, Zubin, who is a former software engineer at Google. Yes, Google. And he'll be working with you and I will too, one-on-one in a very intimate setting to focus on you, give you a personalized learning roadmap, and then working with you to get the job of your dreams in tech. It is only for ambitious people that really are serious about changing their careers and understand that this commitment is going to be a big one. This is a life-changing process, but it's totally worth it. If you want to work with us, there's 15 spots available for this year. Hope to see you inside. See you around.